Hey team, welcome back to another episode of the Strength Game Podcast. I'm your host, Nick O'Brien, and this is episode number 97. The Strength Game is a weekly podcast dedicated to discussing all things physical culture with the coaches, athletes, iron enthusiasts, and experts deeply embedded in the strength game on both sides of the profession, both as coaches and as competitive athletes. I want to thank everyone who has liked, shared, and commented. Your support allows us to continue to bring on expert guests and highlight more individuals in the strength game, just like our guest today. Also want to thank our sponsors. Samson Equipment provides first-class weight rooms and has earned an exceptional reputation of providing the finest quality, design, and customer service. Being a direct manufacturer, the team at Samson brings full customization capabilities and not only branding, but in custom equipment needed to execute your next project. From racks, plates, barbells, dumbbells, benches, flooring, and much more, Samson equipment is durable and made to order from premium grade materials, all built from scratch, start to finish. Samson equipment provides professional weight room solutions for all your strength conditioning needs. See the Samson standard for yourself and learn more at samsonequipment.com. Also want to thank our sponsors, Cerberus Strength. Cerberus is an organization that truly puts the athlete first and actively works towards providing the best quality gear at an affordable price. Owned and operated by active lifters, Cerberus has quickly evolved into a global brand symbolizing quality and trust. If you're in the market for the highest quality strength and conditioning gear and equipment, be sure to check out CerberusStrength.com and use promo code STRENGTH_game to receive an extra 10% off your next order. And in this week's episode, I am joined by Andy Brown. Andy is a sports performance coach at the University of Massachusetts Amherst, where he oversees training for the men's soccer, men's and women's swimming and diving, and tennis programs. Prior to arriving at UMass, Andy was a strength conditioning coach at American University from 2019 to 2022. And he also worked at Franklin Pierce University for 2 years. First arriving in 2017, he spent his first season as an assistant before being promoted to head coach going into his second year. He also has previous stops as an intern at the University of Maryland in 2016, at James Madison University in 2014, as well as experience working at the high school level. Andy is an avid strength athlete and has previous experience competing in both powerlifting and Olympic weightlifting over his career. I'm excited to have him on the show today. So with all that said, let's get in the game with Coach Andy Brown. What's going on, everybody? Today we've got Coach Andy Brown on the show. What's going on, man?
Not a whole lot. Appreciate you having me on. I've listened to the podcast for a little while now. Some friends of mine have been on it, so I'm glad to finally link up and have a conversation with you.
No, I'm appreciative. I'm glad you listened to the show. Yeah, we've got fellow mentors between our times at American with Coach Foster and Coach Alex Lee. Both of those guys have graced the show, so it's cool to get you on as well.
Yeah, no, definitely. And it's funny. I always kind of feel like I'm like the odd, like distant cousin in terms of like the Georgetown crew. Cause like I'm kind of in the crew, but I've never actually like worked at Georgetown, but I've got the Sean Foster connection. So getting to know all you guys and everything has been a blast over the years. So again, just excited to be on here chatting with you.
Yeah, there's a few guys that are sneaky in the crew that just hang out around like everybody so closely that you forget that they never worked there.
Yeah.
But it's such a cool tight-knit group. And yeah, we've had so many people with those connections on, and I think Foster's Tree and now American and Georgetown just kind of being close to each other. We're getting people from left and right that are going on to bigger and better things after it. So it's pretty cool. So I'm excited to get you on, man. Let's jump right into it. Like, how'd you first get started in training, like sports you played growing up, leading to competing in powerlifting and now competing in weightlifting?
Yeah, I mean, just played sports through high school, and I'd say like my first real introduction into training when I got to high school, a guy named Jim Hayes, he was like your classic kind of old school football coach. Like this big dude, like even in his 60s, like still benching like the house and stuff like that. But what he did is he like really welcomed a lot of people in, created a really good atmosphere where like when I was like a dinky little freshman and I wandered into the weight room, he was very welcoming to me. And that's where I kind of got started training and really fell in love with it. And then from there, like it's pretty unstructured, right? And then you get to college, sporting career ended, and you're just kind of reading every T Nation article, everything off Elite FTS, trying to get as big as strong as you possibly can. And then it kind of just rolled in from there. Did my first internship during my undergrad at JMU. So now I'm starting to learn more about periodization, everything like that. As I'm writing my own training, it's starting to get a little bit more dialed in. Worked at a private facility after that called Five Rings Fitness, where they had a lot of powerlifters, Olympic weightlifters. So that's where I kind of dove into powerlifting, did my first few meets and things like that. And then from there, decided I want to get back into the college realm of coaching, things like that. Did an internship at Maryland. And that wasn't really till I got to AU working under Sean, where I was really exposed to the Olympic lifts for the first time and really started to train them. So that was in 2016. And from there, I was just kind of recreationally lifting, trying to get better at the snatch, clean, and jerk because they were pretty rough when I first started. And then I did my first competition 2019, and then been doing it ever since. So it's been fun. I've enjoyed the training of it. I've had some cool moments in both sports, and the reason why I continue to do it is A, for the challenge of it. It's a hard thing to do, and then B, I enjoy the outcome, like putting it all together on the platform.
Yeah, it's fun. It's fun. The training is great, but it's cool to have an outcome, and it's cool to have to like actually go out on the platform and kind of see where your training culminates and see kind of the work you put in, especially when you've done it more than once. That first time where you dip your toe in, like obviously like training with anybody, learning all the movements and kind of feeling it out. Most of the time, those coaches are always like, you should do a meet, just and like poking and prodding. And like, I know you guys probably did the same thing. You just set up mock meets like in the facility. It was like, or it's max out Friday, whatever it is. And like that bug, like it starts itching a little bit more. And you're like, oh man, I might as well just buy a singlet and do it. And it's cool to see it continue and progress from there. Cause I mean, now you're still kind of hooked.
Oh yeah, definitely. And like you said, the some of the funnest memories are going to various universities, like heading up to Georgetown or having people come in and you get like a big Friday going with a good crew and you're lifting with friends and things like that. So that's a big part of like why I enjoy it and things like that. And then yeah, also seeing the progress on the platform as well.
Yeah, it's a bond over that barbell. It's cool to get everybody together. It's hard to come by, but in those areas like Georgetown and American, like being so close together, it's cool to link all those coaches and get like a group together. And it's way better than just kind of networking like we're doing now. I wish we could do it more in person where we're actually like training at the same time. But for now we'll make it do like this. So you touched on it a little bit, like why it's important for you to continue training and everything too. So where do you kind of see that tie-in where it comes back? Because now you're coaching in strength conditioning in the collegiate realm. Where does that tie come back and play a part in what you do as a coach?
I think in terms of like the training, like my own training's influence on coaching, I think like experience under the bar is never a bad thing. Because when you're in there lifting and training and things like that, kids will see you. And at least my experience has been like they'll ask questions like, hey, what are you training for? What are you doing? Like, why don't we do some of these things? So it kind of gives them a perspective of like, oh, like our coach is working towards something too, just like we're working towards something. And then to be honest, as I get further into my career, the influence in terms of like coaching decisions that I make based on any kind of background in strength sports, I kind of almost separate the two even more from just like training athletes in terms of like how I would train myself. I just kind of break it down to what core principles do I care about? What training principles do I care about? What effect do I want to influence in terms of the sports I'm coaching? and then what's the easiest, most effective way to get there. So I just kind of break it down by the sports that I have. What do I want to see my soccer guys do? I want to see them fit. I want to see them sprint fast. My swimmers and divers, I want to see them be able to push off the wall hard, push off the blocks, things of that nature. Tennis, rotational power, lower body power can still be a component in that too. So I think everybody benefits from training, but what that actually looks like, I've kind of maybe changed over the years of like, maybe everybody doesn't need to be, cleaning and doing something like that. Are they good to do? Can all those teams do that? Absolutely. But it's kind of now evolved from being experienced with the lifts, having a lot of good mentors who have taught me what exactly to look for, mainly Sean Foster, mainly Alex Lee, is kind of like, okay, cool. Being able to pick their brains, being able to train it myself has now given me a really good understanding of what exactly I'm looking for and how to best incorporate that with my groups. Because just because the bar gets from, say, your mid thigh to your shoulders doesn't exactly mean you're getting exactly what you want to get out of it in terms of, say, the clean and stuff like that. So again, are you getting those benefits that you want, that you're kind of laying out for yourself? And if you're not, I've probably actually developed a quicker trigger to find some other means, whether it be some other form of ballistic movements, med ball work, weighted jumps, things like that, variations of the clean and snatch and things of that nature.
Yeah, that's a good point too. I mean, it's great to have mentors that kind of teach you all those things. They're technicians, especially in Olympic lifting too, which, yeah, it's helped you as an athlete, but it's cool to hear that the further you get, there's more separation, because you're training for a sport. The last thing you want to do is train an athlete for a sport like weightlifting or powerlifting. It needs to be a tool that you can project and make sure that it's efficiently used for them as athletic performance. But I like what you said about, like, just because a bar is getting from like mid thigh to like overhead, or mid thigh to like your shoulder, it might not, what's happening in between, if you just take a snapshot in the beginning and the top position, like what's happening in between could vary drastically too. So yeah, there's plenty of movements that are going to get that same stimulus that you can do. And I know for you, I'm sure that you have to utilize so many different stimuli working with a field sport versus swimming, like aquatic sport, and then a rotational sport like tennis. Like, where do you kind of blanket put some of these ballistic movements in with those teams? And do you give like a little bit of autonomy or freedom to, like, say, if you don't clean tennis and one player like exhibits like really good skills at those variations, are they allowed to kind of have the reins a little bit more and clean them, or are you trying to keep everybody within the same bucket?
That's a good question. So I'll maybe even take a step back and be like, what exactly am I looking for in the clean, right? It's just like, I'm looking for an aggressive, hard push through the ground, right? Like, so if that bar stays in the mid thigh, I don't want to see it like slide way down the leg, seeing you utilize momentum and stuff like that. And just as hard and aggressively as you're pushing down into the floor, as soon as you are done extending, making that bar go up, now how quickly can you change directions, drop your center of mass, get back under the bar? I think that's a very underutilized aspect of those Olympic variations. So when I say, just because the bar reaches your shoulders or goes overhead doesn't necessarily mean you're getting exactly what you're looking for. Like, those are probably like the main components. And then obviously, if you've got the mobility and stuff, the front rack a bar, the mobility to bring it overhead and things like that. But that's what I'm kind of like looking for. Like, are you exhibiting those traits and the intent of what we're trying to do? So I think everything I'll kind of start people off with, in terms of whether you're a freshman or if I haven't seen you lift, or maybe you're just not quite catching on to what we're doing, like, can I now break those components down and still train those aspects that we would want to see? And say, for example, for what you just said of like, is there any autonomy? Like with my swim groups right now, I've got a group who are doing full cleans, they're catching. I got a group that's doing just like pulls, but with a large emphasis just kind of on that initial push through the ground. So I'm like, I don't even care if they really jump into the air, if it's more kind of like a barbell jump. And then I've got like any kind of freshman or anything, they're doing a lot of med ball throws, a lot of dumbbell jumps, a lot of weighted jumps and things like that. And now, is that the best way to go about doing it. I think after, I run this program through the fall, through the spring, I'll have a better idea and things of that nature. But I think for right now, I couldn't honestly say to myself, like, the whole team is getting the benefit out of this clean if I was going to have all of them turn it over, because sometimes it doesn't look it can look a little gross sometimes. And so you just got to be honest with the kids in the sense of, like, it's nothing that you're doing wrong, or it has no impact on like your athletic ability in your sport. It's just, here's what we're looking for. We're not quite there technically with this aspect, so this is why we're doing this variation. So all these guys, the main thing I'm coaching up to them right now, I got a lot of people just going from the high hang. Those pulls are from the high hang. The dumbbell jumps are just a nice counter movement jump, sort of mimicking, again, those same qualities of, like, can you dip, drive, push through the ground aggressively? The only difference being now, since that one piece isn't in place with some of these groups, I'm not so worried about dropping under quick, turning the bar over. But if we can progress them to there, we're still kind of working in some barbell work, some technical aspects, some things like that. So hopefully we can progress them to there. But I have progressions built in, regressions built in, just in case, an athlete never gets to that point. So to answer your question, yeah, there is some autonomy built in where I'll have some groups doing different things, and that's just making sure I'm organized on top of everything to make sure everybody's getting, the best variation of the program that we can, because I'd rather see somebody be aggressive pushing through the ground with a heavier load, say on a clean pull, than just casually turning over 55, 65 pounds on a clean where we're not really using our legs, not really pushing through the ground, things of that nature, not really getting that triple extension, pulling under the bar fast, things of that nature.
Right. Yeah. Cause then you're just completing a lift. Like you're just doing a rep. Like, to your point, there's no intent behind it. You're actually not training the traits that are, and the focus of what the purpose behind that movement is. Like the stimulus you're trying to get out of it. You're just accomplishing something and not doing a very good job of it. No, but I like what you really said, like those conversations you're having with the athletes, because I think that becomes even more important if you're going to start splitting up into like ability groups, in a sense, like especially within a team, because when you take them, like you take swimmers out of their environment or you put them in their environment, they're all good swimmers. Like there's going to be some that excel more, there's going to be some that are doing every type of race, but they're all good skill wise at their sport. When you take them out of the water and you put them in the weight room, some of those tendencies don't really translate over, and their training age is completely different. So having an honest conversation with them, like, hey, this is what we're trying to accomplish, but you're not quite there yet. And then like taking them a step back and regressing them so that they can improve on and then see that there's another step. I think that's huge, because without doing that, most people just really jump too quick into some of these main movements, whether it's squat, bench, deadlift, or it's clean, snatch, and jerks. Like people quickly go right into the full movement, I think, too soon. And I think learning from those guys, and like, I know you're probably huge on it. You just talked about it, like all those different variations and progressions or regression. One, that's a confidence booster if an athlete goes from a jump shrug to a clean pull to whatever it's next in your progression, but you're also not doing something sloppy just to say you're cleaning from the floor.
I can't, I don't even really have too many people that go from the floor. Probably actually up here at UMass, none, to be honest. It's either, position one, the high hang below the knee blocks, variations like that. Again, because like the further you get, in my opinion, the further you get away from just like that mid thigh or anything else, it's like the more that can go wrong. The more technical it becomes, the harder it becomes. So it's like, just put the bar exactly where you want it. Where do you want you? Right in that mid thigh, right in your hip, if you're snatching, and then just like push through the ground aggressively. So,
no, that's great. Have you seen any differences between the teams, like in terms of actually trying to train them, like any pushback between like the athletes or coaches? Because a lot of times you'll get coaches that kind of sit on both fences where they're like, I'm adamant about doing this, or I'm adamant about not doing this and implementing the program. Have you seen any pushback between them, or or between the athletes where they either really want to do it or don't want to do it, don't understand it, and how you've been able to kind of address that and kind of influence them that this is the program and this is how we're going to kind of accomplish this stuff?
I'm pretty lucky up here. All the groups that I work with, for the most part, in terms of coaching staffs, but are like they want their team's training. They're kind of bought in, and then it's kind of on me to make sure, like you just said, like the understanding piece. Like I try to make sure every bit of the program is thoroughly explained why we're doing certain things at certain times of the year. One example I can kind of go over quickly is men's soccer. They do a good job of, especially the off season, we'll train hard. Like I just kind of mentioned, we might get a little finicky once we get in season, we start playing games and stuff like that. But what's happened is I've built up the trust of the staff, of the guys, where we'll still get in. We probably lift once a week, maybe if the schedule's funky, a week, like every 7 to 10 days or so. So not, I wouldn't say ideal in any sense, but what we do is just getting them in there and being able to do a little bit of training in my book is a win. And then I'm able to supplement it with enough sprinting, plyos and stuff on the field where I can, at least in my mind, check the box of, I can honestly say, I think we're doing enough to maintain and build qualities in season. So kind of like I mentioned earlier, like, what do I care most about at this time right now? Like, do I care that we're squatting heavy or hinging heavy or doing any of this stuff? Not particularly. I want to see us healthy. I want to see us fast. I want to see us keeping fitness, and I want to see us playing at a high level. So we are, I think, doing a good job in that sense of, there's a lot of guys. I think we've had half the guys, maybe a little bit more, who have hit new highs in their max velocities this in-season period. We got another handful of guys who have hit 100% as well. So for a majority of the guys, we're getting the exposures every week to top end speeds. So again, they're kind of at baseline, at minimum, we're just building in a little bit of, armor, injury prevention, whatever, however you want to label it, of they're getting that weekly exposure of 90+%. So I can confidently say, that they're prepared for, that quality. And then B, we're even able to build off it a little bit with the time I'm given at practice, to try and actually train these guys to be a little bit faster. So I think that's sort of built into where I'm kind of shifting from my mindset of, how am I training these guys in the weight room? What exercise are we doing? Which, like, well, what can I do on the field with these guys? What can I do to actually, can I dive more into the speed side of things? Because that's probably an area over the last few years that I've needed to kind of step my game up a little bit and try to dive in and learn more about, and then trying to implement some of these things and then gauging and seeing how they go. So like, luckily for us, I've been slowly building these guys out, tracking their speeds at practices every day. And it's trending towards us being faster now at the midway point of the season than we were during the preseason. When we are in the weight room, my biggest thing is I try to bucket the guys in terms of who are heavy minute guys, who are moderate minute guys, who are low minute guys. And the staff has done a great job of, buying into what I've been trying to tell them of, hey, if we got guys who are, freshmen, redshirt guys, whoever, this is a good opportunity to train them, to just get them up to speed with the movements we're going to want them to do in the off season. So again, the minimum goal is they're just competent in the movements, so we don't have to spend 2-3 weeks a month on the back end teaching them or having them get familiar with these things. They can tend usually, if they're a freshman or anything like that, they're going to want to have them, get stronger, build out a little bit. So again, just more reps earlier on in their career is going to benefit them. And then we'll still train under the same umbrella, but I'll have the guys who played higher minutes, their lift might be a little bit more range of motion based. Again, just derivatives of what we do. Could be an empty bar squat, could be a counterbalance squat, could be a mobility drill. But everybody's still training some aspect of speed, mobility, strength as we're in there. So we're still checking those boxes off as well. And again, I don't think it's ever going to be perfect, but again, I think we're doing enough to where I can honestly say, I think we're doing an okay job in season maintaining these qualities that we want to see out on the field.
No, that's awesome. Yeah, it's a healthy balance. Like, soccer's always seemed to have a stigma to it. I mean, it's hard to with, the amount of minutes that are played and just kind of the amount of coverage, like total volume covered and just sprint distance and everything that's going to happen during the course of a game. It's hard to really find times to train them during the season. Like I know you're going on Wednesdays and Saturdays sometimes for your matches. Like the girls, like my girls are going every Thursday and Sunday. Like we haven't had a one game a week pretty much all season. So it's hard to like pick and choose when you're going to be able to get some of those training sessions in. So you have to be very meticulous. Like it might not happen every week. You might be able to train like max strength qualities, like between 7 and 14 days. That might be all you could do. So I think you do a really good job of like translating stuff over to the field. And I'm sure that the coaches are super appreciative of that too, because you're the guy that's in the weight room controlling that setting. They're controlling that soccer setting. And then when you come out to their environment, you bridge the gap between the two. And again, you train the qualities you want to see just in a different setting. It might not be exactly what you want to do all the time, but you found the best scenario to make sure that those guys are still getting everything they need in just a different environment.
Yeah, definitely. And if you send them a catapult report with some higher speeds on there, it usually solves a lot of problems too. So legs can't be too heavy if they're continually running fast. So, but no, you made a great point of just again thinking of what are the principles you care about and what's the best way to go about training that principle. Because again, it doesn't always have to be a heavy squat. It doesn't always have to be in the weight. Like again, if you told me everybody can hit a new max velo, but you don't want to, but none of it's going to be done in the weight room, I would take that. Because again, we're not training weightlifters, not training powerlifters. If I can get guys running faster, let's just do whatever's going to make that happen. Like, let's do that.
Yeah, whatever gets the job done. It doesn't really matter how you do it. It's whatever gets the job done and has the best product when the field comes, and who the best 11 on that field are.
And to be clear, I still think the weight room does play a aspect in that. Like, I think there is something definitely to be said for learning to do the movements, getting the strength abilities, the mobility qualities out of all those movements, things like that. So like this definitely, I'm not trying to like de-emphasize the weight room by any means. I think it's just more of an emphasis of some of these other qualities and these other training modalities as well.
Definitely. Yeah, like you said, this is a little different kind of setting than what your previous job was at American. Like you had so many teams in that setting, and like a lot of the emphasis, to your point, and as we kind of know, is driven in the weight room. And there's so many programs and there's so little time, and the facility is small in a sense that you have to always, like, the priority is what happens in the weight room. But now you're kind of able to step out a little bit more, to your point, and be on the field and do more things. How is that kind of new dynamic to your like coaching repertoire helped you, and how have you what have you leaned on for resources, or how have you tried to develop yourself to kind of be a more well-rounded coach and do more on the field and step out of the weight room?
That's a great question. So like at AU, like you mentioned, like a lot of the schedule is built out and a lot of our time is spent in the weight room, just because with the size of our space, with the amount of athletes we had, the schedule was just jam-packed, like back to back to back to back. So a big benefit of that, and a good part of that, is you got a ton of coaching reps in. So you really got to, and with it pretty much just being barbells, dumbbells, you had to be really good at coaching up those lifts and getting kids moving well, getting kids moving efficiently, getting big groups kind of in and out of that space. So I was very appreciative of that time. And during both my stints there, working with Sean and Alex, because I think it really helped hone my ability to do some of those things, from both watching them and then also having my teams out on the floor there as well. But there was always kind of that piece of, I was kind of wishing I could do more I was kind of wishing that, you could be out on the field running conditioning sessions, doing some speed work and some training and things like that. And there are definitely times where I could do a little bit of that, but only as the schedule allowed. So maybe a couple times a week, and things of that nature. But definitely able to do that a little bit more up here now, only having three teams and only one field based team has kind of just allowed me to dive into the weeds just a little bit more. And honestly, just like lean on some of the same the mentors that I've had and kind of seeing how they do things. And then also my girlfriend's a director of track and field over at Assumption University. So I bounce ideas, especially for like speed work and stuff like that. I bounce ideas off her all the time. And she'll be blunt with me too and be like, yeah, that's a good idea. Or like, nah, it's stupid. You should do this or that. So she's actually been a huge help. Because that's been the big thing for me of like, I'm not any kind of expert in anything really, Olympic lifts, sprint training, anything like that. But what I do is I try to lean on good people, ask as many questions as I can. And one big thing, especially lately, of just really being comfortable enough to be like, man, if I don't know something, just say I don't know. Like I'd rather there's some sort of like stoic quote, I think, where it's like, it's better to look like an idiot for 2 minutes than for like a lifetime or something like that, where it's like, if you don't know something and you ask, then now you know it. But if you just never ask and you're kind of faking it till you make it, then you're never really getting better. So
I like that. Yeah, that's a big thing. It's a hard thing for coaches to admit. We talked before too. Like another thing is just learning, like as we progress in our career, like being able to say no, like being able to like push things away and take stuff off your plate. Like both of those things are super big, but you don't realize those till later in your career. So yeah, leaning on people. I feel like I'm a jack of all trades, but not a master of any. And I don't know if that's a good thing, because it seems like more and more in this profession, you see people that are getting some of the higher roles that are niche people. So I don't know if it'll work out maybe it'll work out one day where that Swiss Army knife person gets a little bit of everything, but that's kind of how I've always operated too. I feel like knowing a little bit of everything is helpful, and being able to tell an athlete, being able to tell a coach is like, you know what, I'm not really sure about that. Let me get back to you. And then following up on those things, like you basically won twice. You admitted to them that like you don't know it all. And then you came back and you follow up and you give them the answer that they were looking for. Like I feel like you double down when you do something like that too.
yeah, it shows you're willing to like be genuine and be honest with people in the sense of like, I don't have all the answers, but I'll work my butt off to try to find exactly what we're looking for. And then it just sort of compounds into you just gaining more knowledge. And I think, like you said earlier, I think I actually kind of lean towards being more of a generalist in the sense of like, if you can generally understand, like in any sport, you're going to accelerate, you're going to decelerate, you're going to hit max. Like that translates to soccer, lacrosse, like all these, like everybody wants to sprint fast. So it's like knowing how to, like, again, what to look for, what to coach up, that kind of translates over to all that. And then same idea, can you spot the fitness differences in these sports as well? How would you train these athletes differently? And then I feel like that can almost help you build in a niche of now, if you just kind of learn the constraints of the game, the rules of the game, the dimensions of the game, you can now talk shop with anybody. And then just I've sort of found just by chance, like wherever I'm working. So like now at the last 3 universities I've worked with soccer, but I don't really consider myself like a soccer person. You know what I mean? Because I feel like I can dive in and talk with sport coaches about, the various sports I've worked with throughout my career, which is, again, I think in hindsight, a good thing when you're kind of early on in the game and you're either in a position where you're taking on a lot of teams or you've got a big role, or maybe your schedule is jam packed. You get that experience working with, I don't think there's a team I haven't worked with now. So again, it's like, that's something where I could maybe use that to hone in on a certain thing, or maybe start to make a niche for myself or anything like that. But also at the same time, I'm not really overly concerned with, what kind of niche I'm creating for myself.
Right. No, that's a good point too. Yeah, I know up there you've had to cover down on some teams and everything too, with just staff realignments and everything like that. But being able to work with everybody and be able to have conversations with all these coaches, like the more you know about the constraints and the games and everything, the more you can kind of go into these conversations like and speak on their terms. Like you come from experience in your own field, but you walk into their field and you don't come in empty handed and you don't come in kind of lost. And then you can ask like more poignant questions because you have a frame of reference, even if you don't like consider yourself a soccer guy, like you have experience from different levels of soccer that you can go in and like they feel like you're not starting at square one, but you're also modest enough and like humble to be like, hey, listen, I really don't know as much as you. I'm your assistant at this point. Like, how can I better serve you? And then I'll tell you about my like level of expertise when it comes to like strength and conditioning, sports performance.
Yeah, and I think they kind of appreciate that. What I've found just working with coaches over the years, if you come in saying, like, you're the expert in the sport, I actually want to pick your brain, ask you questions like how are we trying to play? Like, what strategies are you implementing? What style of play are we trying to, form our team around and things like that? They get that sense of A, he's invested, he's interested in what we're doing. And B, he's not trying to come in and be like, well, we should do this thing a certain way, or we should condition a certain way, or, things of that nature, where it's like, it now becomes a collaborative effort. Like you're saying, like, oh, I'm almost like an assistant on your staff. You tell me exactly what we're trying to accomplish and I'll help guide you. Like, this is the best way to go about doing that.
Right. Yeah, it's better. That's better than creating a huge divide in the very beginning too, because you go in guns blazing like, hey, this is my system, how I run it, and you're gonna get so much pushback from a coach who's like, cool, well, this is my team and I don't need you to be a part of it.
Yeah, come in confident, but don't come in too hot.
Oh, for sure. Hey, so we talked about it. Well, we haven't talked about this yet because getting a lot of that experience, like not only from like AU and some of the other places you've been, but like taking over a program, like getting promoted, like at Franklin and Pierce, like that must have been an interesting kind of thing too, to like lead a department. And also
sure was.
Not only is that, it's like it's at a Division II level, so it's a little bit unique with some of probably the constraints and resources that you're dealing with, and probably staffing as well. How was the difference, like one stepping into that role, getting promoted, and then what has been some of maybe the differences between that level and then like bumping back up and coming to like going to American and then now going to UMass?
Yeah, so it was I was a grad assistant my first year at Franklin Pierce. My boss then left, took a director job elsewhere, and like you mentioned, I was promoted to being the director of strength and conditioning. So as that whole process was going, like late into that summer, I was like, I want this job. This would be really cool. Kind of, I feel like everybody kind of gets into it to be like, man, I want to climb the ladder. I want to be a director, all these things. So for the first few days, it was definitely like that. I'm like, this is awesome. And then it kind of all hits you where it's like, man, there's a lot that goes into being a director as opposed to just being an assistant or part of a staff or things like that, where now everything kind of falls on you as a manager. Of you're managing however many other staff members are, part of your department. You're managing a budget, the schedule. Now you're interacting with not just your coaches, but all the coaches, whether it be, putting that schedule together or communicating with them about how, the staff is handling everything and things of that nature. So at the Division II level, it was almost kind of like a watered down version of that, where the staff I was overseeing wasn't big at all. It was one graduate assistant. But on the flip side, it was 22 teams. And so scheduling them, managing expectations for what we can do and things of that nature was definitely a challenge. And it really actually started to make me think about what I kind of really wanted to get out of the field. Because again, kind of like I just mentioned, I think everybody has these grand impressions of climbing the ladder, working at a big time school, being a director at a big time school and things like that. And I was like, man, I'm just not exactly sure if that's where I want. So it was a great experience in the sense of being exposed to all those things, being able to work with a number a large number of athletes, a large number of coaching staffs as well. But I got to a point where that just wasn't really sustainable. I was looking to be a little closer to home, and that's how I ultimately ended up back at American University. So some people, it's funny, some people that I knew were kind of like, oh man, you're going from a director role back to an assistant. But in my mind, the biggest thing I felt like I needed as a coach was some more reps under good people, more people to kind of learn and grow under, and sort of bettering myself as a coach that way. So I think I did a good job of a Franklin Pierce. I think I did, the best job that I could. But what I really started to do once I was down back at American was I started to take more either mental notes or physical notes or whatever it was. I started paying more attention to, say, what directors I was working under were doing. So I was kind of looking at, Sean Foster, I was looking at Alex Lee, and I was just paying more attention to, like, okay, what is their day? What does their day entail? What responsibilities do they have, and things like that. So I got to the point where now I'm kind of a believer in whether I want to be another director or I want to be a director again or whatever it might be. You're not really prepared for a job that you've never had before, but you can try your best to have an idea of what the demands will be, have an idea of systems you could put in place, whether it's, how you're communicating with people and things like that, to do the best job you can to start to get your own kind of program running and off the ground. Because I think that was the big thing for me at Franklin Pierce. That first semester was kind of trial and error of like, man, what works, what doesn't work? Is this the most efficient way to go about things? Am I, extending my day unnecessarily because I'm not organized in this aspect or that aspect? Where the spring semester compared to the fall was kind of like night and day. And then things started to click a little bit and like, oh man, this is running a lot smoother. I set the schedule up this way. This is how I communicate with coaches. I'm going to spend this day in meetings, yada, yada, like so on and so forth. And then I go back to the second part of your question of how does that compare from a Division II to a Division I? It kind of almost is, I'd say, a case by case basis, more so on the school, maybe more so than the actual kind of maybe level of it. So like Franklin Pierce, fairly small D2 school, comparatively to American D1, step up, but at the same time, smaller Patriot League school. So then even compared to, say, UMass now, I almost view them as three completely different situations just because of the size of the campus, the number of coaches there are, differences in things like, say, at the Division I, though, something I didn't face at the Division II level was having to deal with, say, like a nutrition station, things like that. That aspect didn't really come into play just because of budget reasons and a lack of resources, nutritionists and so on and so forth. Whereas both of that aspect was very present at both American and UMass, but now in different ways, where it's like Alex and I were carrying in loads and loads of protein shakes into the weight room, making a whole, we call it the protein shake wall. We would just build them up. And then up at UMass, we've got a nutrition station. It's run by dietetic and nutrition interns. So again, it's just like a completely different kind of ball game in the sense of just how it's set up. So that's sort of like notes I'm taking in the sense of every situation is going to be different, but can you find any sort of commonalities? Is there anything that you can put in place that would translate from, say, one situation to the next, just to help yourself get familiarized with whatever it is you might be doing in whatever role you're in at that university?
Yeah. And I think that's great too, because it's kind of similar to what we talked about with coaching too, and just having those tools and experience with different sports. Like, you want to be a generalist. So if you have more experience at different universities at different levels, like even the high school level or private sector, all those things allow you to kind of get to the point where, one, you can kind of figure out where you want to be in your career. Because there's a lot of points in time where it might be the tipping point where people make or break and get out. But you could find out, like, hey, maybe it's not coaching, maybe it's just the level, or it's the area, or it's the situation you're in. It's not necessarily just what the profession is. I think a lot of people probably, I've seen a lot of interns or volunteers come in and just kind of throw everything away just in their first semester and be like, hey, this isn't for me. I was like, well, have you tried a different place? Have you tried like a different clientele, a different athlete, a different environment? Because to your point, like I've been at multiple Division I schools and each of them is different. And the level, the like what you're playing with, the resources, the staff, like the expectations, they're all vastly different. And you could still draw a lot of things from each of them that carry over to the next role in your position if you're paying attention to it and if you're taking notes and you're not just kind of going day to day just doing your job. I think you did a good job like realizing it, being maybe not as prepared at Franklin Pierce for the head job when you moved back and you're like, listen, I know I got a taste of what it's like as a director. There's a lot of things that I can learn. Let me learn from someone that's doing it at a higher level as a director so that I can see if I want to do that again, but I have some notes because I'm learning every single day from someone else. And I think that's helpful, especially for anybody that wants to climb the ladder or make this a career versus just a couple of years of a profession.
Yeah, and I think you can, what you may not know going into a situation, you can definitely make up for with a willingness to, like I think I had mentioned, or like over communicate, like see how things work. Like, okay, what's our weight room size? How's the schedule work? What are coaches' expectations? Like, as long as you're proactive and really trying to like get a grasp of just how things are going to operate in a certain situation at a certain school, I think you'll be okay. You'll be fine in the sense of the willingness and the ability to quickly get up to speed with what exactly the job entails will just help a lot initially and will kind of make up for maybe everything you kind of don't know at the beginning. And then once you kind of have that understanding, because even like I was at Franklin Pierce for a full year and then I stepped in as the director and I was like, man, I was unaware of X, Y, and Z and things like that. So that's where it's even if you are fairly familiar with a place, there's still probably some stuff you're just aware of what's going on or how exactly everything operates. So that's where I think just that initial ability to sort of come in with your hair on fire a little bit in the sense of, hey, I'm going to be enthusiastic. I'm going to work my butt off to get up to speed as quick as I can, knowing that each day, each week, each month is going to be more efficient than the last.
Right. Yeah, I know going through that experience has probably helped you a lot, and it's gonna prepare you if you so choose to kind of take on a role like that in the future. What would you say are some, besides the things you kind of mentioned, are some potential like keys to success that you would suggest to someone like maybe in their first month or like their first semester, like their first 6 months or year, in terms of running a department? Like what would you say are some like big rocks that you like no shit need to focus on first, kind of from your experience that you maybe didn't realize until you were in that chair?
I think that quote or that saying I said earlier of like come in confident but don't come in too hot, in the sense that you should be confident in what you're doing because you wouldn't have been hired for that position or you probably wouldn't have made it this far in your career if you weren't somewhat good at what you do. But what I kind of mean by that is I don't think you want to come in and just blow up the entire setup of what's going on. Maybe there's some stuff that you see initially where it's like, man, why were people doing things this way? Or why is the schedule set up this way? But at the same time, you can slowly start to implement changes as you see fit. Because I think the second big point I would make is like learn everything you can about how coaches like to operate, what their expectations are, things like that. So at least you're on the same page. Maybe you can't make everything happen. Maybe you can't be out on the field with them as much as you want, or maybe you can't give them all the lift times that they want and things like that. But you're at least creating a dialogue of like, okay, this is what this coach expects. This is what I can give them. How do I now communicate and, bridge that info and that news to them of like, hey, here's what our realistic expectations are, where they're feeling like they're still getting a lot out of the training. They're still getting everything that they want, but then also your kind of work-life balance is in order too. So I think those would be maybe my big two. Because I'm obviously I'm not in a director role up here, but I look at sort of when I first got up to UMass, and there's things that soccer was almost halfway through their season. I came in late last semester, so I came in, just trying to, all right, how do you guys operate? How do you guys like to practice? What do we do? How do we structure our week and things like that? And on the flip side, they were winning and they were playing pretty well when I got here. So like the last thing I wanted to do was come in, blow everything up and be like, okay, guys, like I'm here now. Here's how we're going to do things. Here's how I want to do like our warm up. Here's how the lifts are going to be, where it's like, no, this is like, they're having success. They had success before I was here. Let's continue that success rolling. Maybe I can tweak a thing or two here and there initially just to kind of start that process. But then fast forward a year later, and I've now got everything running the exact way that I want it. So I think the ability to make changes gradually over time is a big one, where you don't want to get too frustrated or, upset too early, in the sense of, man, this isn't optimal. This isn't how we should be doing stuff. That kind of stuff takes time and takes just incremental progress in terms of getting stuff to where you ultimately want it. And that can sometimes even take years. But you can definitely start to make those changes. And as long as you're communicating and, learning everything you can about where you're at, I think you'll be in a good spot.
For sure. Yeah, it's not coming in too hot and not really like completely overhauling what's going on. Because like to your point, you stepped in when they're having success. I would say just as much if you came in and they weren't having success. Like you don't know really what's working super well and what the problem, like what the issues are, without actually coming in and kind of observing and seeing what's going on. Because there's a lot of things, if you just come in and overhaul everything and change everything completely, like you don't really know what is actually successful and what could have just stayed. So I think that's a good point too, like just kind of seeing what the previous staff was doing. And I mean, if you come in too and you overhaul everything, you basically said that the previous staff was garbage. If you do that.
Yeah, that, and then the kid, even like the kids and coaches can see it too, where it's like, well, who's this guy who's coming in and changing every last thing that we've been doing? So it's like,
and you don't know how they feel about those coaches too. Like a lot of those athletes might have been really attached to that coach, and like you don't know the terms of why they left. A lot of times you kind of just step into a role, and sometimes athletes, I've been around some athletes where I've been like their fourth, fifth, sixth strength coach in their career at the same school, and they feel like they're just getting passed around like a hot potato the whole time. And they're very, very tentative of even like opening up and being vulnerable at all around you, that coming in too hot and like demanding stuff from them, you probably lost them forever.
Yeah, and that's the biggest thing. So I guess maybe one more thing to tack on is like just start building relationships like from the get-go. Because like ultimately, what you're implementing, you can change over time and things like that. And I would say that's actually easier to do if you've got the trust of the athlete. So if you're in a new role, a new team, whatever it might be, like just start to get to know the kids, start talking to them, start building that relationship, start explaining exactly what you're trying to do. So then they're like, oh, that makes sense. Or like, oh yeah, no, Andy, like he's new, but he's asking me how classes are going. He's asking me all these questions about how the season's going, stuff like that. So again, you build up that trust. So then when you do want to start making these changes, they feel like they know you already. They feel like you're invested in them. And then those changes are just easier to make, where on the flip side, you try to do that too early, or it's like, I don't even know this guy. Like, who is this guy telling me to do all this stuff? So
yeah, definitely having a relationship is easier to kind of get athletes to, I mean, for lack of a better term, do what you want them to do. But ultimately, they're going to follow a program if they believe in you and you have some sort of relationship built. So that's definitely a good point to consider. And I mean, all those things that you had as a director role, like definitely serve you well, even a supportive role, like as an assistant too, and set you up for the future. I wanted to kind of circle back to what we were talking about before, like getting more used to like getting on the field and doing more stuff out of the weight room, but like with your own training, because you're doing a lot of stuff, getting ready for the platform, weightlifting, and competing in that. Have you been able to add some stuff like maybe some sprint work or some plyometric stuff into your own training as you look to kind of learn more so kind of how that impacts, especially soccer, and what you want to program from them since they're outside so often? And like, how are you able to kind of tie that back into your own training? Does it have a little bit of benefit, or is it trial and error? Or are you just all on the barbell for you now?
I still mostly still barbell, but what I would say is definitely not so much running. I've been implementing a lot of like mass biking and stuff into my programs recently. I've become a big fan of that just because it doesn't seem to beat me up too bad where I can still train hard. But definitely adding in some more plyos, jumps, bounds, things like that. Like anything I feel like I would kind of have to demo or show the kids or want to better understand, I feel like I should be able to do, demonstrate, kind of talk them through. So even if I'm not out there like conditioning hard on the field or like really full out sprinting myself, I want to have a good understanding of what it feels like to like project myself out. If I'm trying to accelerate, what it means to like kind of cycle under and like strike down right underneath you if we're like hitting, like if we're at a max velocity or upper higher velocities, and now we're out of that acceleration phase and things like that. So definitely a little bit of incorporating some of those aspects in, for the betterment of me learning and understanding kind of like how they feel, how I can coach it up, how can I explain it better.
I like it. Yeah, it's always kind of a tricky subject when someone is like competing for something, even though like obviously it's a hobby for us and we're at the level where we're paying to like go to competition. No one's paying us to do it at this level. So incorporating kind of some of the things to learn and kind of better educate ourselves and like you said, get that feel for how these movements are and how the athletes are going to ultimately be able to execute these movements. If you're a great demo, it's hard to like put that into the program that you're really like torn and excited about, because sometimes they don't blend as well.
Oh yeah, definitely. And then it's also a lot, again, like being honest with yourself, like the same way if we're talking like Olympic movements and how I have like a quicker trigger to maybe pull them out of some programs or change some things up because I've kind of been under the bar, felt those positions, know what I'm looking for. I'm trying to replicate that. By no means am I an expert. I'm always still trying to learn. But the same idea, like I'm not going to be able to correct a kid and help him get faster if I don't know what I'm looking for, or if I can't coach it or communicate it better. And that's just something where not having a lot of maybe like true sprinting experience or things like that. That's another reason why I kind of want to incorporate these things or work on or learn some of these things where it's like, I want to be able to make sure like I can confidently give a kid a cue, confidently tell him like, hey, when like as we're like we could probably project and push to our back leg longer until like we're not really striking back as we're like on our initial first 3 to 5 steps, things like that. Just in the sense of if I can't confidently coach it, I feel like they're going to be able to pick up on that pretty quick of like, hey, we're not really getting faster and Andy doesn't really know what he's talking about.
Yeah, you better project confidence too and understand like what that feel is, because that athletes will be able to sniff that out
Oh yeah.
if you don't feel like something you put into the program, like if you're not confident in coaching it and you don't know like really what it is or how it's set up or like what the positions look like, the smart athletes will start questioning you. And even if they don't right in that moment, like they'll plant that seed, and it'll get worse and worse if you show your true colors and don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah, and I welcome all the questions, whether it's any kind of programming for anything. Like if they're asking me questions, it just gives me a better understanding of like where they're at, kind of what they're thinking about. And just maybe there is just some aspect that like, oh man, maybe I got to coach this up better. Maybe I got to find a better cue or spend a little bit more time here because I'm getting this question kind of constantly. So I always welcome feedback because again, it helps me, it helps them understand what we're trying to do. And it just kind of completes that loop of just communication, understanding between coach and athlete.
Yeah, that feedback is huge because otherwise, like especially if you're in the office talking to other coaches, it's an echo chamber where everybody in there is speaking the same language. Like we understand what we put on the program and like what we deliver to the athletes. Like we understand it better than them because we're the ones that wrote it and we're the ones that are supposed to be professionals in what we're doing. But if they don't understand it, they don't need to understand it to the same level as us. But if they don't understand like the basic concepts of it, like how to execute it, like what the intent and focus is, what it should look like, how it should feel, like just generally, then there's a huge disconnect. And the more feedback you can get, the better. Like I did that with some of my baseball guys the other day. I like blacked out for a second and brought them all in like between the groups and I completely forgot what I was doing. And I was like, you know what? Let's just like open forum. Like who has questions about what we're doing that haven't said anything? Because I guarantee there's guys thinking about what's going on. Ask me anything about the program, what we have going on, like movements we're doing, like why we're doing a certain thing. Why does the program look like this? And like it was a good chance to like get a few things. I was like, we're not leaving until we at least get a few. And to hear some of the guys like and like ask things and other ones were like nodding to be able to like tell them why. Like I had no idea some of the things that they were asking, like that they didn't understand. And I don't want them, I told them, I was like, I don't want you guys to blindly follow me. I just because I put it on the board, like I don't want you to just obey everything. I also don't want you to question everything all the time, but there should be some back and forth with what we do. And I want you to understand like what it is because that makes you a better athlete. And then like kind of circling back to what we talked about in the beginning, you can afford to give them more autonomy and have more ownership over the program if they know a little bit more about what we're doing.
Yeah, no, and great point of there's a line to that of more than welcome to ask questions, but once you're given the answer, like that's the answer.
Yeah, that's it. That's it after that. Yeah, we capped it. We capped it at like a hard couple minutes. Like we were gonna go, they had started going on a tangent, so we were done with that. But hey, like any good training session, Andy, we end the show with a finisher. So I got 4 quarters, 4 questions, and hopefully you're prepared for some overtime for soccer this year. So I got you can go rapid fire with any of them, or you can expand on any you need to. But you ready?
I'm nervous, excited, but I'm ready.
Hey, they're straight shooters. We got you. Hey, so first one I got for you: biggest influence in strength and conditioning, and biggest influence in strength sports in general.
Biggest influence in strength and conditioning. I've been extremely spoiled with mentors. My first internship was under Christian Carter at JMU. So like the first things I ever was exposed to were Mike Stone articles, Mike Stone book. Christian has his doctorate from ETSU, extremely smart guy, weightlifting coach for Renaissance periodization. So right from the get-go, I was exposed to really great stuff. And then I got to go with my AU mentors of Sean Foster and Alex Lee. Sean really showed me how to really structure a program, really structure what I wanted to do. And then Alex was a really big influence in how I could really start to be creative within the concepts and the principles and kind of make training kind of however I saw fit for different teams, different scenarios. So, and then in the strength world, I'll say information wise, I think Dr. Mike Israetel, sticking with Renaissance periodization, that guy, in my opinion, is one of the smartest dudes out there. He does a really good job of really simplifying training concepts and things like that. And even though he talks mostly about hypertrophy training and bodybuilding, the amount of content that he puts out through his YouTube channel, I think is unmatched. So I'd have to go. Those would be my top 4, I think.
All right. Hey, so when you're not training, when you're not coaching and you're outside weight room walls and you're not like traveling all the time with teams, what can you be found doing? What are some of your go-to hobbies?
Go-to hobby, I'd say me and my girlfriend and I were either trying to find uh the best breweries around the New England area. That's probably the main one. And then getting a little more into all my reading selections, I feel like for the past decade have just been training books. So I'm trying to like branch out and just read more and different stuff. So right now I'm reading Surprise Kill Vanish by Annie Jacobson. It's about like paramilitary, like CIA operations dating from like World War II up through like the present day. So I'm in my 30s now. So I either got to get into like smoking meats, craft beer, like military history. So that's kind of what I'm going. I'm going with the third one, trying to live up on my military history.
I mean, it sounds like you're dabbling in all three. Like if you got a grill somewhere outside, but that's fine. Hey, so if you weren't coaching, like maybe you kind of realized this like at that one point in time when you were at Franklin Pierce, but what do you think you would be doing if you weren't coaching as a profession? And if you could pick a sport you haven't done yet to go pro in, what would that be?
First one is tough because I've tried to like sit there because I feel like everybody kind of has this conversation with themselves. Like, how long do I want to do this? If I wasn't coaching, what would I do? And honestly, I can't really see myself kind of outside the realm of sports. So I don't know if that would be more of kind of a personal training, private sector type job, or be involved in some sort in running some sort of facility, maybe a management type position. But I can't see myself in an office, can't see myself kind of working a 9 to 5 and things like that. So I feel like I'd have to still stay somewhat in the realm of sports. Maybe the position just kind of changes. And then if I had to go pro in a sport I've never done or a sport I've never coached,
A sport you've never done.
sport I've never done. I did at Franklin Pierce, I did get to train their bowling team. And watching those old like ESPN classic videos of being a professional bowler, I'm blank on the dude's name, but it's the who do you think you are? I am guy.
Oh,
Oh,
that guy,
that guy just looks
yeah.
like he was having a great time. So maybe I have to go bowling.
The only thing that bums me out about professional bowling is I like all the cartoons when you hit like a couple strikes in a row. You miss out on that, but I guess you got the crowd, so it's a little different.
Well, there is like Sean Foster once told me if you can do the sport while drinking, then it's not actually a sport. So
That eliminates a lot of them. That eliminates beer.
that so
That gets rid of beer
that might
hockey
not
for
count.
me. No, come on. Beer league hockey is still a sport. Just albeit it gets a lot slower and your shifts get a lot poorer. So it is what
So
it is.
if I couldn't pick that one, I would go some type of thrower. I just think throwers are those are like watching Ryan Krauser, Joe Kovacs, those guys just crushing big throws. That might be my backup choice if
I
I
like
can't.
that. I like that one too. Hey, so if you're setting up an ideal training day for yourself, what is playing like in your headphones or on the speakers, and what is hands down the best post-training meal?
If I'm on the ox and nobody cares what I'm listening to, some sort of heavy metal, Metallica, Pantera, AC/DC. Doesn't have to be like super, super heavy, but definitely make a mix of 80s, 90s rock and metal, things like that. And then if I had a backup choice, maybe everybody's getting too scared and stuff like that. I could go throw on some EDM. That's always a good backup, gets the people going a little bit. And then the idea post workout meal would be right after as much chocolate milk as I could possibly drink, and then give myself maybe like an hour and a half, and then go eat the biggest steak and as much mashed potatoes as I possibly can.
All right, all right. All right, last one I got for you for overtime. Best and like most valuable piece of advice you've received, and if you want to share from who, and it doesn't have to be strength and conditioning or coaching related.
Best piece of advice that I've received. That's a good question. That is, I would actually say it may not be one singular piece of advice, but anytime I need any kind of like moral guidance, I'm lucky enough to be able to pick up the phone, call my dad anytime I need it. And he's always just, anytime there's any kind of issue of how to handle a certain situation, how to deal with people, he's always spot on with the advice. So I'm gonna have to go with my dad on that one.
Nice. No, it's super helpful to have someone like a family member or coaching mentors or anybody in your corner willing to help with some of those things. It's nice to have an outside perspective, or at least be able to bounce ideas off of them, even if they don't really understand like the profession or the realm you're working in. So no, that's awesome, man. Well, hey, for anybody that's got any follow-up questions for you or wants to kind of check in on what you got going on, how can they get in touch with you?
They can email me at apbrown@umass.edu. Always feel free to, and then you can follow me on social media if you want. I'm Andy BSC on most stuff, but I really don't post very often on there. I like social media for some aspects of it, but there's some aspects of social media I very much do not like. So I try to be somewhat scarce on social media. Don't do a whole lot of posting.
I hear you, man. It's a weird world out there, but
sure is.
Hey, nonetheless, hey, I appreciate you coming on. It was good to catch up a little bit, and it's good to kind of keep the tree growing from around that DC area. So we'll make sure we kind of get almost everybody that fell from that tree, and not try to pump Sean and Alex's tires too much, but those guys have been helpful. So it's cool to kind of see where you've gone in your career and keep in touch. So I appreciate you coming on today, man.
No, and likewise, very much appreciate you having me on. Hopefully I didn't ramble too much and there's maybe a nugget or two on here, but no, definitely enjoyed the time on here with you today.
No, rambling's always encouraged, man. So I know the audience will really appreciate this episode and hearing from you. So I appreciate it, Andy, and good luck with the rest of your season, man.
Appreciate it. Likewise, my friend.
That's it for this episode of The Strength Game. Thank you again to this week's guest and to our sponsors. Be sure to connect and keep up with our guests at the links in the description below. Remember to subscribe to us on Apple and Google Podcasts, Spotify, or your favorite podcast provider to stay up to date on all future episodes. Also, check us out on YouTube and CoachO'Brien.com, where you can find all the video versions of these episodes, as well as show notes, episode schedule, and much more. Comments, ratings, and reviews are always welcome and appreciated. Thanks again for tuning in, and be sure to join us next week for another great episode of The Strength Game.